If you struggle to express your anger, or if when you express your anger it causes problems in your communication, I feel your pain. I know for me, one of the hardest times to communicate is when I'm angry. And that's because feeling anger is uncomfortable. Expressing it can be even more uncomfortable. So I'm going to share some things that you can do when you're angry to make sure you still get to say what you need to say without causing unnecessary pain or conflict. Before we get started, I want to tell you about the event that I'm doing at the end of this month. It's a virtual group coaching call to help people hold space for their anger and for the rest of their emotional experience, and get better at holding space for other people's emotions. It's called Holding Space. On January 26th at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, you can join via this QR code here, or find it in the link below. Now, to express our anger in a healthy way, the first thing we're going to do is some preventative medicine. Getting to know the signs of your anger when it comes up so that you can avoid those moments where you're already speaking angrily without realizing it, or even where you're saying things you don't mean out of anger. What do I mean by signs of anger? Well, this includes angry thoughts that come up, and meditation and mindfulness practices are very helpful in teaching us to notice those patterns. And the thoughts are pretty difficult to catch before they come out as words. So I like to focus on the physical experience of anger, the bodily sensations that accompany our anger and are often warning signs that we are starting to get angry. For me, this includes tension in my shoulders, and a little bit of shrugging, some clenching in my jaw, as well as my face getting flushed and hot, sometimes even sweaty. These are pretty common, but some others include a feeling of a pit in your stomach, or clenching your hands, or this kind of urge to move, this fight or flight kind of response when anger starts to come up. And if we tune into these body sensations, it's very helpful because these happen before the angry thoughts do. So we're a step ahead of those thoughts. It's a little bit easier to catch them before our anger comes out in less healthy ways. Now, notice that I'm not telling you to do anything with your anger, not telling you to fix it, to change it, to suppress it, to set it aside for later. The point is to feel it and to honor it, because it's trying to tell you something really important. It's trying to tell you that something is off, and we'll come back to that. But we want to spend some time with our anger so that we get to know what it feels like to start getting angry. I know this is really difficult as someone who's spent decades bottling up his anger for fear of rocking the boat or fear of hurting people he loved. But now that we have some awareness of how our anger shows up in our bodies, and we can practice catching it before it comes out in our words, we can focus on the events that made us angry. This is step 2, being very clear and non-judgmental about the specific events that caused our anger. To demonstrate what I mean by clear and non-judgmental, I want you to listen to these 2 different statements. You ignored me versus you didn't respond. The first one ascribed some intent to that person. They ignored me. They didn't want to hear me or listen or respond. Whereas the second one simply describes what happened that made me angry. And I'm sure you can infer which one is likely to lead to a more productive conversation. You'll want to look out for these sneaky descriptions of things that have made their way into our commonplace ways of describing events. Things like ignored, like betrayed, like neglected. These imply some sort of judgment or intent from the other person when we don't really know. All we know is the event that made us angry. They didn't respond. The next thing you want to do to start to express your anger in a healthy way is to be very clear about why this is important to you. This is the crux of why you are angry in the first place, because some kind of boundary was crossed or neglected, some values of yours were contradicted, or some agreement or expectation was not upheld. So ask yourselves those questions. What values of mine were contradicted? What boundary was crossed? What agreement was not upheld? That's the source of your anger most of the time. And this is the important thing that your anger is trying to tell you. So this is what is worth communicating, and we want to be very clear and very non-judgmental, again, about why this is important to us. I'll give some examples at the end to make sure this all makes sense to wrap it up for us. But lastly, it's time to be very clear about what you need now. if there's some course of action that needs to be taken, what need is trying to be met here. It could be as simple as, I want you to understand that that made me angry and do your best not to do it again. So for a couple of examples to wrap this all up. First, when you didn't respond to my text that was time sensitive, I felt angry because I needed clarity in that moment and it was urgent. I know it's not always possible to respond, so I'd like to have a conversation about how to handle these situations better in the future. That last part is one of my favorite ways for opening up a productive conversation about our emotional experience and really connecting with somebody, because it's not about blaming them or shaming them, it's about how we can come together and do this better. One more example. When you said that thing, I felt angry because it contained an unfair judgment of my intent, and it's very important to me that we give each other more grace. So once you get to know your anger and how it shows up, you can start to catch it before it comes out, and this gives you a moment to be very clear about the specific events, not the judgments or the stories, that caused your anger. You get to explore why it's important to you, and then you can be very clear with who you're communicating with, what you need from the situation. Give this a try and let me know how it goes. Join us at the event on January 26th, and as always, let your heart do the talking.